Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Invest Africa. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. Now, it's been 21 years since Namibia gained its independence, and the country is now considered an active and responsible member among its community of nations. This week, we take a closer look at the business opportunities and challenges that this Southern Africa country faces.
Bordering the South Atlantic Ocean between Angola and South Africa and spanning just over 824,000 square kilometers, Namibia is home to some 2 million people. Namibia, the world's fourth largest producer of uranium, also produces large quantities of zinc and is a small producer of gold and other minerals. Mining only employs 3% of the population, accounts for 8% of GDP, but provides for more than 50% of foreign exchange earnings. The Namibian economy is heavily dependent on the extraction and processing of these minerals for export, namely in the Southern African Customs Union, or SACU region, from which it also imports petroleum products, chemicals, machinery and fuel. In 2007, increased payments from SACU put Namibia's budget into surplus for the first time since independence. A modest performance in mining and agriculture, which was caused by severe flooding in the north of Namibia, coupled with a dampened demand for mineral products due to the weaker global economy, saw economic growth slow to 3.8% in 2011 from 6.6% in 2010. Growth prospects for the medium term are positive, with GDP expected to continue in its path of recovery and posting at 4.2% for 2012-2013. This is, however, dependent on strong performance in construction, farming, manufacturing and mining. Although education receives the largest share of the national budget, the inability to equip and match learners with the skills required in the labour market has been attributed to the country's high youth unemployment rate. Namibia is making great strides, but the global economic downturn emanating from the sovereign debt crisis in the Eurozone, structural reductions in SACU, poverty and inequality may threaten the country's positive medium-term outlook.
Now, those roads with so few cars make me want to believe that perhaps Namibia is the place to be. Now, joining me in studio to take a closer look at the country as a business investment destination, I've got Thandiwe Njobe. She's head of coverage for investment banking, Southern and Central Africa at Standard Bank. And joining us from our bureau in Windhoek, Namibia, is Tara Shanika, CEO, Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Let me begin in studio by perhaps getting from you, Thandiwe, just your assessment of Namibia as an investment destination, given the constraints that we know it faces. It's a small country, it's a huge country, and it's also sort of parked within the global giant, South Africa.
Right, and I think on your last point, I think that sometimes is a benefit to Namibia. Actually, its links into the CMA then tends to get painted along the same lines as South Africa does, an investment destination. From our point of view, we like Namibia as an investment country. We think there's opportunity definitely in the mining sector. I think your clip before we started this interview pointed out that Namibia is the fourth largest producer of uranium across the globe, and we see a lot of interest coming out of China and Russia into that sector. I think other mining sectors may be a little bit more mature, say gold and diamond mining, but they still continue to produce and provide foreign exchange revenues as well as contribute significantly to GDP. So from our point of view, we like it. We like that it's a stable economy. Its political system is stable. It's demonstrated democratic governance since independence some 20 or so years ago. Yeah. And we like that government is fairly prudent in the way it manages its fiscus. And so we like Namibia as a destination. So
Thandiwe, if you're going to do a SWOT then for Namibia, let's just look at it in terms of competitiveness. I was just looking at the numbers and the latest figures in terms of its the ease of doing business. This is according to the World Bank. And I saw Namibia has actually been sliding down the ranks, down 4 places in this year's report to number 78, suggesting that perhaps, yes, in the past there were these instances where this was a very good place to do business, but we're sliding. Is that an assessment you'd agree with?
I think it's very difficult to gauge, not knowing the parameters that inform that assessment. I think Namibia, it offers a safe and stable investment environment. I mean, the regulatory framework is there. The financial system is one of the most sophisticated on the African continent. Its stock market is sizable in spite of it having a few listed corporates. And again, like I say, I think it should probably rank as close to South Africa as it could because of its strong links with the CMA and also South Africa being one of its larger trading partners.
Yeah, so we're going to come back to that point because then I'm going to suggest that perhaps part of the reason why it's not ranking close to South Africa is that there are domestic factors that are coming into play here. But let's take the conversation to Windhoek in Namibia, where we have got Tara. He's the CEO of Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Tara, the question I want to put to you is, at number 78 in terms of the ease of doing business in Namibia, is that a fair reflection of where Namibia stands, because you represent companies that operate in the Namibian environment?
Well, I think it's difficult to say yes or no. It's fairly placed because I haven't been able to look at the main reasons why Namibia has been ranked at that rank of 78 and why it has fallen 4 places down. I think in my view, Namibia is a fairly competitive economy in terms of investments. The opportunities it offers are enormous. The political and economic systems are very stable. And I think the economic fundamentals are very strong. And I agree with my colleague that Namibia's economy is so closely linked to South Africa that you can hardly have a lot of dynamics that would be different from those of South Africa. And it begs the question why Namibia would be ranked so far away from South Africa. But I think that a lot of efforts have been put in by government and private sector and other institutions to ensure that our competitiveness is as good as it can be. Perhaps Namibia has been sliding, perhaps because maybe other countries have become so competitive so fast, and perhaps we have not been pushing hard enough to remain where we have been before.
Right. Okay. Let's take the case of those strengths then that you are talking about in terms of what Namibia offers. Give me the top ones that perhaps a person who's watching this program and is thinking perhaps of going to Namibia would look at and say, I would like to go to this place because of X and X and X.
First of all, we have been very stable politically. Since independence, we have had successive democratic, free and fair elections. We have very good governance in the country. We have an independent judiciary. Our capacity and capabilities for enforcing contracts has been proven to be one of the best in the world. When you have a contract in Namibia, we are known to be able to enforce that contract. We have also very good economic fundamentals. We have been managing the economy very well. There haven't been a social unrest, of course, in the country for many, many years, and I think this could put Namibia in a very good position to attract whatever investments that one can attract. I think we have been doing well.
So the World Bank is unfairly ranking Namibia at number 78 is the message that I'm getting. Let me come back to you, Thandiwe. One of the questions that I posed to you before we went off was why Namibia is not more, perhaps slightly higher than where it sits at number 78, because we know South Africa is sitting around, what, 52, I think, in terms of that overall ranking. Are there specific issues here where Namibia perhaps has been sliding in terms of improving its overall investment climate, or is it, as Tara is suggesting, that other countries have become competitive and in the process Namibia stood still as a stable democracy and not improved itself?
I think that could be, your latter point could be possibly a reason. Like I say, it's very hard to understand the divergence between South Africa and Namibia because the economies are so closely linked. A lot of the firms that are in Namibia, that are invested in Namibia, are actually South African firms, and they dominate the Namibian stock exchange. So it may be that the competitive environment and the competitive landscape is just, it's moving much faster outside of Namibia than in Namibia at present. And maybe that's driven by also requirements. Say if we were comparing it to other African countries, I'm not sure where they rank, but there may be a bigger requirement for them to attract new investment into their economies.
One of the factors that I was looking at, I saw in our pack that we put at the top of the show that in terms of economic growth, that growth has slowed down in the past few years, whereas you do know that there are, of course, African economies that are growing at the rate of your 7, 8, 9, 10%. So your Ethiopias, your Ghanas, your Angolas, etc. So perhaps therein lies the issue. But let's talk about the opportunities then in terms of what Namibia offers. Yes, you've got these South African companies, but you're also dealing here with a very small economy in terms of overall size, numbers on the GDP level, as well as total numbers in terms of the market. This is not a market that you go and try and say, I'm going to try and service this market. You're trying to go there and look outside, no?
Right. I think you raise a very important point, because Namibia does have good investment sectors, but at the same time, it's got a very small population. So on the retail or the consumer-facing side, there isn't the huge growth that you'd see, say, in markets like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Nigeria, which have much larger populations. What is interesting, I think, for Namibia, though, if we just look at that sector as an opportunity, is this proximity to Angola. There is demand coming out of Angola for consumer products, and as you know, that market is coming off a lower base than Namibia. So for those companies that are well positioned to move and start driving into that Angolan market, I think there's a real opportunity.
Which sectors then would you look at?
All the consumer-facing sectors, so just consumer products in general. Banking may be a little bit more tricky, just because regulatory environments can be quite different, but I think especially on the consumer-facing side, where you're seeing a lot of growth in, say, West Africa or East Africa, that could be the opportunity through Namibia into Angola. On the mining side, I think, you know, as we've mentioned, there is opportunity, and you are seeing the large miners coming in to look at investing in uranium. And then the other side, I think, is the infrastructure. The story of infrastructure in Namibia is a very strong one. We know government still maintains control over its strategic sectors in power and rail and port infrastructure.
Should they?
I think that's right. I think that's right for now, because there's a significant need to upgrade and develop all those sectors. And so there's an opportunity there possibly for public-private partnerships, but also for significant investments to come from the East or other areas, even South Africa. Yeah,
let's bring Tara into the conversation. Tara, obviously you are on the ground, and therefore you deal with these guys that are looking at Namibia, those that are coming from outside the country and those that are inside the country. Give me a few hot sectors, please. She's suggested consumer-facing sectors, then there's also the mining sector. Is there anything else that anyone else hasn't discovered yet?
Well, there are many other sectors. There has been a growth in the interest in terms of oil and gas exploration. Namibia, there has been some gas discovered in the southern part of Namibia, and there is a lot of exploration that is taking place now in the oil and gas industry. There are many people who believe that Namibia has the potential to possess oil and gas resources, and there is a lot of efforts being made in that regard. We, of course, have a lot of opportunities, not only in Angola, but also in other countries like Zambia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Namibia has been developing infrastructure to reach out to those markets, and I think there are potential also to export from Namibia, or using Namibia as a launching pad to enter into those markets, especially those landlocked countries where they don't have the access to the sea. And of course, last week we saw the ruling party's policy conference taking place, where they looked at a number of policy options. And what has come out, especially from the press conferences that the Secretary General of the SWAPO party has been holding during the conference, was that a lot of policies were going to change so that the competitiveness of the economy is improved.
Now, if you were going to give me just one issue that you would like addressed by the government, assume I'm the president here of Namibia. I'm not. I want to make that clear. But assuming I am, what advice would you give me in terms of the one thing that you'd like addressed?
Well, I think it's important to address the land delivery in urban areas as far as business is concerned. I think the process is still a bit slow. I know that has been one of the issues that the policy conference of the ruling party has been looking at, so that they can be sent to or given to government to look at. But I think that is probably one of the greatest area of concern to business in Namibia that needs to be addressed.
Tara Shanika, CEO of the Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, thank you for joining us from Windhoek. We're going now for a quick commercial break. There will be more in West Africa right after the break. Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa. Now, the Namibian government devised the targeted intervention program for employment and economic growth with a total funding of 9.1 billion Namibian dollars. This program is aimed at addressing economic growth and targeted government support to facilitate the growth of strategic sectors in the economy. Let's take a look.
Namibia continues to have a stable political, trade and investment climate. This is complemented by modern infrastructure such as airports, roads and telecoms, in line with the sustainable industrialization of Namibia by 2030, which was the theme for this year's Namibian Chamber of Commerce and Industry's annual summit.
And we'll also be looking at three key themes within industrialization, and that is really the issue of energy, which is critical to building industries and sustaining industries, the issue of logistics and transport, and of course the issue of financing industries in Namibia.
Apart from projects such as oil exploration, the country has put a roadmap in place over the next 5 years, where specific investments will be made in key sectors.
We would like to see a bit more investments in agriculture. We would like to see more investments in agro-processing. We would like to add more value to our fish, more value to our minerals. We are, of course, looking at oil and gas exploration, which is taking place. But our main focus really is to see to it that we have a lot of manufacturing taking place so that by the year 2030, we will have achieved 80% of our GDP coming from manufacturing and services industries, and 70% of our of our export receipts basically coming from manufactured products that we'll be exporting.
Transport and logistics are becoming more important in African countries, where highways and railways link economic hubs. And an important question that needs to be addressed in any infrastructure development is whether to work on growth that demands these structures or to lay their infrastructure first in order to attract investment.
We are not waiting for investments to come. We are basically building in anticipation for the investments to come. We are very sure investments will come.
The Namibian Marine Phosphate Project is one of the many projects being implemented.
Obviously, people are very excited because of the economic impact. There are people in the fisheries and that who are a bit scared of the impact we'd have on the fisheries. And I think it's a matter of getting all these opinions balanced. But generally, I think we can do it and we can make it successful.
And it is by managing the expectations of local industries and the rest of the population that Namibia can ensure further success of such projects. Tumisho Mahanyele, Johannesburg.
Now, still with me in studio is Tandiwe Njobe. She's head of coverage for investment banking, Southern and Central Africa at Standard Bank. And now joining us from our studios in Windhoek is John Mandihi, CEO of the Namibian Stock Exchange. John, tell me, we are seeing a lot of stories suggesting that everything appears to be positive about Namibia. Are things looking as positive for the stock exchange, which we know, of course, is dominated by South African companies?
Well, on the NSX, we're really dependent at the moment on a lot of dual listings out of South Africa and elsewhere in the world. We've got dual listings from Toronto and Australia, and we had one from AIM. What we did find was that our biggest opportunity, Extract Resources, was then acquired by the Chinese, and they have delisted in the meantime. So that particular segment dropped from about 25 billion rands worth down to under 2. So we're not finding a lot of that. In oil and gas, we've had some companies come to the market, but as you know, it's very expensive, and we are not a risk-taking country. We're a very sort of conservative investment opportunity because we're looking after a growing and a young population. So we have good news in that we have one listing. Nictus is splitting up its South African operation to both Namibian and South Africa. And we have a listing on Friday. And then we have a depository receipt coming in from B2 Gold, which we hope is going to be something more. But in the meantime, the government has issued or has driven a national sector, a financial sector strategy, which says that the bank should list, the 4 banks should list. One is listed, FNB is listed at the moment. One is in the throes of discussing a listing, and the other 2 can't be far behind. So we expect to see some activity from this sector charter, or not the charter, but the sector strategy coming forward. So we hope to grow. At the moment, we're looking at correcting the legacies of the past where our legislation is out of date.
Right. Now, is there a case then, John, for the government to insist on any foreign company that comes in and invests in Namibia or takes over a listed entity or at least a national champion to ensure that it remains listed on the stock exchange as part of that transaction?
We have a competition commission which is sort of saying that you have to Namibianize part of a company. If you're taking it over, you've got to do something. And we had Massmart looking at buying Pupkewitz. That deal fell through because the requirements were too stringent. And in the strategy, which is a 10-year period, we're looking at more and more that when you get to a certain size, you should list, but not to benefit the stock exchange. The stock exchange should also list. It should go the route of the JSE, demutualize and list on its own board.
Now, I've got Thandiwe here with me, joining in studio. And Thandiwe, the question I wanted to put to you is, now, of course, you are in deals. So you do deals on behalf of Standard Bank in Central and Southern Africa. Who is looking at Namibia, and why are they looking to Namibia, and how many are they?
Okay, to quantify the numbers might be a little bit difficult, but I think, as we mentioned earlier, on the mining sector, certainly from China, we've seen huge interest. Russia as well. There was not too long ago, a couple of years ago, the Russian president actually led a delegation into Namibia on a visit there. Certainly from some European countries, Namibia has strong links to Germany as well, and that's quite interesting. I think that's inherited from his past. And then, of course, also from South Africa. You know, as my colleague mentioned, there are a number of South African firms that are dual listed there. I think the main banks, I think other than Bank Windhoek, are all have South African origin. So, and we, you know, the listing, I think, also will just affirm and entrench our investment as banks into that economy. So South Africa has certainly got its eye on Namibia.
Yeah, so give me a trend then in terms of what you've been seeing over the past few months and perhaps years. Are we seeing a pickup in terms of the interest of companies that are looking at Namibia as an investment destination? We know, as I was saying earlier on in the program, that this is happening in other parts of Africa.
No, absolutely. I think we definitely do see the interest. We've recently come across some companies that are interested in investing in agricultural processing zones in Namibia, and that's part of that's linked to probably food security issues from the east, but also seeing that as an opportune investment destination for that kind of product and sector. So certainly I've spoken at length about mining. And then there's a lot of interest from China as well on the financing of the infrastructure that government has planned to roll out around its port development, around its rail development, and certainly in the power sector.
Yeah. John, let me come back to you. Now, it does appear like you've got challenges, though things are certainly looking up. You are getting support from the government in terms of trying to get those South African banks listed on the Namibian Stock Exchange. But how do you get companies perhaps that are sitting in geographies like your Torontos, your London, etc., to think, let me go and locate my listing on the Namibian Stock Exchange and then see if there's anything for me to exploit in terms of positioning myself in that economy?
Well, our largest pension fund is the government institution's pension fund, and they have about a war chest of about 51 billion rand. And I'm talking rand so you don't get confused.
Sure.
But their objective is to provide income, an income stream to fund pensions. So they're not in the risk-taking environment. So they're not looking at development companies, they're looking at developed companies. And our Regulation 28, similar to South Africa's Regulation 28 of the Pension Fund Act, is a legacy that we've inherited. And we have to invest 35% in Namibia. The other can go offshore and into the CMA. So we're finding a lot of interest in CMA and international companies. Namibian companies, we've got 6 listed at the moment, and those are really a buy and hold because they are like gold. None of them are involved in gold, but B2 Gold is coming into that market. But they are very sought after companies, so we've got an upward trend on those shares, and they're doing very well. To get the banks listed would give us more opportunity and more choices.
Yeah. John, quick question for you, and it's the last question to you.
I think the item that really for international investors, sorry.
Yeah, no, quick question for you, and this is the last one, as I was saying to you. If you were to have the ear of the president, what's the one thing that you would say to him that you want addressed from a Namibian Stock Exchange perspective?
We want certainty on legislation. We want certainty on the mining laws and on means that the government wants to use to raise the tax or to fill the tax basket that we need to look at. So at the moment we're looking at various alternatives to raise additional money. If we have certainty and companies know they can come in and they've got long-term certainty on the rates and the type of taxes, I think that would be the one area that we certainly want.
Thanks, John. Tanya.
Same question. I would say skills development. I mean, I think it's still a big issue. We learned about high unemployment rates and the skills gap in Namibia. And the reason I say that is because Namibia does have quite protectionist programs around foreigners coming in. And I think addressing your own skills development, small population, get people upskilled, and then you'll be able to open up much more to foreign participation.
Absolutely. So certainty and skills development is the word that we have for the President, hoping you'll be able to see this edition of Africa Invest. We'll be back again at the same time next week. Until then, from me, Godfrey Mutizwa, and my guest, it's goodbye.